On her first time, the millionaire whispered something that changed everything. Today we go slow. No one had ever taken care of her like that, and that's when she discovered what it means to be truly loved. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because the ending will surprise you in a way you can't imagine. Hearts that ignore each other are often the ones that have been searching for each other all along. The New York sun caressed the brownstone facades with its golden rays when Sophia placed the stack of freshly ironed towels on the mahogany shelf. Her fingers, marked by 7 years of labor, lingered for a moment on the delicate embroidery. In this mansion overlooking the Hudson River, every object seemed to tell a story to which she would never belong. She was 25 and had the persistent feeling that her life consisted of being invisible. A housekeeper in this lavish property since she had left Brooklyn at 18, Sophia knew every corner of these imposing walls, every creak of the century-old hardwood floors, every nuance of light according to the seasons. Yet no one seemed to really see her. That morning, like all others, she had risen at 5. The kitchen had filled with the aromas of cinnamon and orange blossom from her signature coffee, well before the first footsteps echoed in the hallways. It was her silent way of existing, through those small details that no one noticed, but which, she knew, made all the difference. "Just another ordinary day," she murmured, arranging a bouquet of white carnations in the crystal vase in the entryway. That's when she glimpsed him in the reflection of the antique mirror, Thomas Blackwood, the owner of the place, descending the marble staircase with that natural elegance that characterized his 45 years. Graying temples, amber eyes that always seemed to be looking for something beyond the visible. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, watching her. "These carnations," he began in a deep voice that made Sophia jump, "they completely transform the atmosphere of this entrance." She froze, cheeks flushing, unable to tell if it was a criticism or a compliment. Her eyes instinctively lowered, a reflex acquired from a mother who had always taught her that women like them should never look directly at people of his stature. "Thank you, sir," she simply replied. When she finally dared to look up, he had disappeared. But something had changed. For the first time in 7 years, she had the strange sensation of having been seen. What she didn't know then was that in the library, with thousands of volumes, Thomas Blackwood sat near the window, contemplating the gardens where a young woman with measured gestures meticulously arranged the heritage roses, and that for months he had been observing this daily dance with growing fascination. Fate had placed under the same roof two solitudes that still ignored each other, but which, like two distant constellations, were imperceptibly beginning to gravitate toward one another. The rainy March afternoon transformed New York into a watercolor of gray and blue tones. Raindrops drummed against the mansion's enormous windows, creating a soothing melody that accompanied Sophia in her daily tasks. Arms laden with a pile of embroidered towels for the guest rooms, she climbed the marble staircase when her foot slipped on a damp step. The moment froze, the pile of linens scattering in the air like a flock of white birds, her body tilting backward, the sudden certainty of the imminent fall. Then, appearing out of nowhere, strong hands caught her. The contact was electric, unexpected warmth through the thin fabric of her uniform. Her gaze met Thomas's, so close that his sandalwood cologne reached her distinctly. "Careful," he whispered, with a gentleness that disconcerted her. The suspended time resumed its course. She straightened awkwardly, her cheeks burning, confused and troubled by this sudden proximity. "I'm sorry for the mess, sir," she stammered, kneeling to pick up the scattered towels. Thomas crouched beside her, helping to gather the linens. This gesture, so simple yet so extraordinary coming from him, froze her. Never would she have imagined seeing this man, heir to a colossal fortune in wine and olive oil exports, kneeling to help her. "These stairs become treacherous in damp weather," he said with a smile that creased fine lines at the corners of his eyes. "I almost fell myself this morning." Sophia knew it was a benevolent lie. Thomas Blackwood always moved with a confidence that nothing seemed able to shake. This gratuitous kindness destabilized her more than the avoided fall. "Thank you," she replied simply, unable to say more. Their fingers brushed as they reached for the last towel, and something indefinable passed between them. A spark, a silent question, perhaps the beginning of a possibility. That night, lying on her narrow bed in the attic of the house, Sophia relived that moment infinitely. The sensation of Thomas's hands on her waist, the warmth of his gaze, that fleeting impression of fully existing in someone's eyes. For the first time in years, she fell asleep with a smile. What she couldn't know was that in the west wing of the mansion, Thomas contemplated his own hands in the lamplight, surprised to still feel the texture of that contact. Since his divorce 5 years earlier, he had taken refuge in elegant solitude. Surrounded by luxury but deprived of that human warmth he strangely rediscovered through this simple touch. "Who are you really, Sophia?" he whispered to the silent night. One April morning, Sophia discovered an open book on the kitchen table. The Great Gatsby, by F. Scott Fitzgerald, marked at the page where Gatsby sees Daisy again. Beside it, an abandoned coffee cup, still warm. It was the first of a long series. Each day a new book mysteriously appeared in her daily universe. Whitman's poems in the laundry room, a collection of Hemingway short stories near the stoves, essays on personal renaissance in the small sitting room she dusted each morning. Sophia read them in secret, during her short breaks, devouring these words that seemed chosen, especially for her. These pages spoke of metamorphoses, second chances, beauty hidden in the ordinary, as if someone were trying to communicate a coded message to her through literature. One poem in particular had moved her, underlined in pencil in a collection by Emily Dickinson. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all." She obviously suspected Thomas was behind these literary appearances, but didn't dare fully believe it. Why would a man like him be interested in her? The very idea seemed absurd. That day, as she deposited clean linen in the library, she surprised him writing. He looked up, his gaze lighting up in a way that made something flutter within her. "Do you like to read, Sophia?" he asked, as if it were the most natural question in the world. She hesitated, torn between the desire to flee and to seize this extended opportunity. "Yes, sir," she finally replied, "when I have the chance." "And what did you think?" "Of what, sir?" "Of Dickinson's poem, the one about hope." The silence that followed was charged with everything they didn't yet dare express. The confirmation was there. It was indeed he who had orchestrated this literary choreography around her. "It made me cry," she confessed, with an honesty that surprised herself. Thomas rose slowly, approached the immense wall bookcase, and extracted a volume bound in midnight blue leather. "Take it," he said, offering her the book. "It's a collection of poems about transformation, about ordinary people who discover their own light." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and this time Sophia didn't immediately withdraw her hand. "Why are you doing this?" she dared to ask. Thomas's gaze softened, revealing a vulnerability she had never glimpsed in him. "Because sometimes we need someone to show us who we really are, through their eyes." That evening, huddled under her worn blanket, Sophia read until dawn. Each page seemed to unlock a part of herself that she had long sealed away. And for the first time, she began to glimpse a troubling truth. Perhaps her life could be more than she had dared imagine until then. The kitchen phone rang one May morning, interrupting Sophia as she prepared almond cookies. Thomas's voice resonated on the other end. "Could you come to my office, please? I need to speak with you." Her heart raced as she traversed the corridors, wondering about this unusual summons. Had she made a mistake? Perhaps he regretted this nascent proximity between them. Thomas waited for her, contemplating the Hudson River through the large window. He turned at her entry, an enigmatic smile on his lips. "I need to attend the Sundance Film Festival next week," he announced without preamble. "I'd like you to accompany me." The world stopped. Sophia remained motionless, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me, sir." "The Sundance Film Festival," he repeated patiently. "It's an important event for my wine business, and I thought you might enjoy seeing the lights of Park City." She lowered her eyes to her simple uniform, then to her hands, reddened by cleaning products. The incongruity of the proposition almost made her laugh. I don't own anything to wear for that kind of event," she murmured. "It's already arranged," he replied, "if you accept, of course." 3 days later, a seamstress came to take her measurements. A week later, she found herself in a suite at the St. Regis Deer Valley, staring incredulously at the red dress with lace details hanging before her like an impossible promise. Park City dazzled her, that mythical place nestled in the Utah mountains, glittering with thousands of lights reflected in the snow. For a girl from Brooklyn who had never left New York, it was like landing on another planet. That evening, in a restaurant overlooking the mountains, Thomas had her taste truffle risotto. The intense flavor exploded on her tongue as violinists played near their table. "Why me?" she finally asked, the question that had haunted her for weeks. Thomas looked at her for a long time as if weighing his answer. "Because you're authentic, Sophia. In a world where everything is calculated, you are real. You place white carnations in the entryway not to impress, but because their simplicity touches you. You hum Frank Sinatra songs while folding laundry when you think no one is listening. You read poetry as if each verse could change your life." He took a sip of wine before continuing. "I've lived surrounded by people who saw in me only a bank account. My own wife." He broke off, the painful memories of his divorce surfacing. "You see me differently, and that makes all the difference." That night, when he escorted her to her hotel room door, he didn't try to kiss her. He simply brushed her cheek with his fingertips, a gesture so light she might have imagined it. "Good night, Sophia. Thank you for accepting to see this world with me." Alone in her luxurious room, Sophia contemplated her reflection in the mirror. This woman in a red dress whom she struggled to recognize. Something had changed in her, imperceptibly but fundamentally. For the first time, she began to see herself through someone else's eyes, and this perspective changed everything. The storm that struck New York in June seemed to have been sent by Greek gods. Violent, dramatic, illuminating the night with bluish flashes that fleetingly revealed the contours of the millennial city. The unleashed elements shook the windows of the mansion, creating an atmosphere of poetic apocalypse. Sophia, unable to sleep, wandered the deserted corridors. Thunder roared like the growl of a primitive beast, making the secular foundations tremble. It was then that she noticed a light under the library door. She hesitated a moment before knocking gently. Hearing no response, she cracked open the door. Thomas was there, seated in a leather armchair, a yellowed photograph in his hands. The sight that greeted her froze her. This man, usually so self-possessed, was crying silently, tears rolling down his face without his making any effort to wipe them away. She should have withdrawn discreetly. Propriety demanded it. But something stronger pushed her forward, that deep intuition that certain moments change the course of a life. "Sir?" she murmured. He looked up, surprised but not trying to hide his state. For the first time, he appeared before her completely vulnerable, without the mask of the accomplished businessman he usually wore. "Today would have been our wedding anniversary," he said simply, indicating the photograph. A smiling couple on a sailboat, he younger, with an elegant golden-haired woman. 15 years, if we had stayed together. Without thinking, Sophia approached and placed her hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she offered, aware of the inadequacy of these words. "The saddest thing is that I don't even know what went wrong," he confessed. "I was so busy building this empire, proving my worth, that I didn't see our marriage crumbling. One day she left. I can't continue to love a man who doesn't know how to be present," she told me. The rain intensified, hammering the windows as if to underscore the gravity of this confession. "I have everything. Money, success, properties. Yet I've never been so alone." Sophia sat on the arm of the chair, their sudden proximity creating a bubble of intimacy in the middle of the immense library. "My mother always says that solitude isn't the absence of others, but the absence of oneself," she murmured. Thomas looked up at her as if truly seeing her for the first time, no longer as the discreet housekeeper, but as a woman possessing her own wisdom. "Your mother is a wise woman." "She's known her share of sorrows," replied Sophia. "She raised a daughter alone in a difficult neighborhood, working as a cleaning lady in hotels, but she never let herself be defined by her sufferings." The silence that followed had nothing embarrassing about it. It was a silence charged with mutual understanding of those rare instances when two souls recognize each other beyond the circumstances that separate them. "You could have left," he finally said. "Taken the door and pretended to have seen nothing. Why did you stay?" The question caught her off guard. Why, indeed? She sought the answer in her heart and was surprised by her own honesty. Because sometimes the strongest person needs to be reminded that they also have the right to be fragile. That night, they talked until dawn, about everything and nothing, about books and childhood dreams, about small daily pleasures and great disappointments. When the first rays of sun filtered through the curtains, something had fundamentally changed between them. An invisible barrier had just fallen, replaced by a fragile but promising bridge. July brought stifling heat and an unexpected visitor. Claire, Thomas's sister, arrived from Boston without warning, pulling up to the mansion's courtyard in a vintage Mustang convertible. Tall, elegant, with the same amber gaze as her brother, but with an almost intimidating confidence, she swept her eyes across the entrance hall and smiled upon spotting Sophia arranging white lilies in a vase. "You must be the famous Sophia," she said without preamble. "My brother talks about you a lot in his letters." The housekeeper blushed violently, caught off guard by this unexpected familiarity. Claire settled in for 2 weeks, bringing with her a breath of freshness and impertinence to the often too silent dwelling. A born observer, she didn't fail to notice the glances exchanged between her brother and the young woman during meals, that delicious tension that floated in the air when they found themselves in the same room. One afternoon, as Sophia harvested aromatic herbs in the garden, Claire joined her, sitting nonchalantly on a stone bench. "You know, it's the first time since his divorce that I've seen my brother smile while reading poetry," she said, observing Sophia from the corner of her eye. "Mr. Blackwood has always loved literature," the young woman replied cautiously, pretending to concentrate on the sprigs of thyme she was gathering. Claire burst into crystalline laughter. "Oh, Sophia, Thomas hates poetry, or at least he hated it before. Something or someone has manifestly changed his perspective." She approached, delicately catching Sophia's wrist to force her to look into her eyes. "My brother hasn't looked at anyone like that in years. Are you afraid of what you feel for him?" The question, so direct, left Sophia speechless. She wanted to deny it, protest that Claire was mistaken, but the words refused to cross her lips. "There's nothing between us," she finally murmured. "It would be impossible." "Impossible," repeated Claire with an enigmatic smile. "Do you know what's impossible, Sophia? That two people who look at each other the way you do continue for long to pretend that nothing is happening." She picked a sprig of lavender that she twirled between her fingers before resuming. "I was 17 when I met Matthew. He was a gardener on our Boston estate. Mother nearly had a stroke when I announced I was going to marry him." "Impossible," she said. "It's been 20 years since we were married." Sophia raised her eyes, incredulous. "Your husband was—" "An employee, yes," completed Claire, "and the most wonderful of men. Life is too short to let conventions dictate who we have the right to love, don't you think?" This conversation resonated in Sophia's mind for days. Claire's question, "Are you afraid of what you feel for him?" became an obsessive refrain. Of course she was afraid. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that it was just gratitude confused with love. Afraid that someone like her didn't deserve to be chosen. But above all, she feared losing herself in this dream, too beautiful to be true, as if by believing in it, she risked waking up brutally to discover she had never left her modest existence in Brooklyn. On the last day of her visit, Claire embraced her at length and whispered in her ear, "Don't forget that happiness sometimes requires courage, my dear, and my brother, despite his airs of an unflappable businessman, desperately needs someone courageous in his life." The call came on an August morning, as New York emptied for the summer holidays, the trembling voice of her mother's neighbor. "Your mom had a fainting spell. The ambulance just took her to New York Presbyterian Hospital." Sophia dropped everything. The laundry she was ironing, the day's plans, the barriers she carefully maintained around her heart. In her panic, she ran to the only person she thought could help her. Thomas found her in tears in the entrance hall, unable to clearly articulate what had just happened. Without asking questions, he had her get into his car. "Tell me where to go," he said simply. Her mother's apartment in Brooklyn was tiny, 2 rooms on the 4th floor without an elevator in a shabby building. The universe in which Sophia had grown up, so far from the luxury of the mansion. She was seized with apprehension seeing Thomas enter this world that she had always kept separate from her professional life. At the hospital, they learned that Mrs. Miller suffered from severe pneumonia, complicated by years of exhausting work that had weakened her immune system. "We'll do our best," said the doctor with that professional neutrality that hinted at the worst, "but her age and general condition aren't in her favor." That night, Thomas didn't return to the mansion. He remained at Sophia's side on the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room, bringing her bitter coffees from the machine, listening to her childhood memories that she shared between anxiety attacks. In the morning, he briefly disappeared and returned accompanied by a renowned pulmonology specialist. "Dr. Richards will personally take care of your mother," he explained in response to her questioning look. It was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Thomas deployed resources that she could never have imagined. The best doctors, first-class treatment, private nurses. He managed his affairs remotely, remaining present beside her at every critical stage. But what truly touched Sophia was seeing him seated at her mother's bedside, calmly discussing traditional cooking recipes, listening with sincere interest to the stories of old New York that the septuagenarian recounted between coughing fits. "Your daughter is extraordinary, Mrs. Miller," she heard him say one day as she returned with drinks. "She brings beauty to every space she touches. You must be very proud." Her mother, this woman hardened by a life of toil and disappointments, looked at Thomas with surprising intensity. "My Sophia has always been too modest for her own good," she replied. "She deserves much better than what life has given her so far." The look they exchanged contained a silent understanding that overwhelmed the young woman, as if these two such different beings suddenly shared an essential truth about her. One evening, as they left the hospital after a particularly trying day, Sophia gathered all her courage. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, stopping under a street lamp whose yellow light created a halo around them. "You have no obligation toward my mother, nor toward me outside our professional relationship." Thomas seemed to search for the right words, his eyes more vulnerable than she had ever seen them. "There was a time when I would have delegated this kind of situation to my assistant, when I would have sent a check and flowers, thinking I'd done my part. I was disconnected from everything, from people, from real emotions." He took a step closer, reducing the space between them. "You reminded me of what really matters, Sophia. Not money or status, but gestures that show that one truly cares about others. So I'm just returning what you've taught me." In this ordinary New York street, under the flickering light of a street lamp, something definitively shifted. Sophia's world, until then divided between the mansion and Brooklyn, between the employee and the woman, began to merge into a coherent whole. And at the center of this fusion was a man who used his power not to control, but to care. September brought that golden light so particular to New York, transforming the city into an impressionist painting with warm colors. Sophia's mother was slowly recovering, now settled in a luxurious convalescent home in Connecticut, an arrangement that Thomas had orchestrated with a discretion that respected the old lady's pride. Evening was falling on the mansion's garden, the setting sun tinting the horizon above the distant Manhattan skyline with pink and orange. Sophia walked among the beds of jasmines, whose intoxicating perfume permeated the mild air, lost in her thoughts. The past weeks had upended all her certainties. The attention Thomas paid her, his kindness toward her mother, that way he had of looking at her as if she were precious. All this outlined the contours of a possibility she didn't yet dare name. She felt him approach before even hearing him, that acute awareness of his presence that she had developed over the months. "The jasmine is magnificent tonight," he said, stopping beside her. "It's my favorite flower," she replied softly. "My mother grew it in a pot on our balcony in Brooklyn, a small miracle of beauty and fragrance amid the concrete." Thomas gently brushed a white flower. Some things managed to blossom in the most unlikely environments. The double meaning didn't escape Sophia. Their gazes met, and she knew this moment would mark a before and after in her life. "Sophia," he began, his voice deeper than usual, "these last few months have been—" He broke off, seeming to search for the right words. "I've never been good at expressing these kinds of things," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Numbers, contracts, negotiations, all that is simple for me. But this," he made a vague gesture between them, "this completely overwhelms me." Sophia felt her heart quicken. Part of her wanted to flee, return to the safety of her well-defined role, to the reassuring limits of what she knew. But another part, stronger, kept her anchored there, in this fragrant garden, facing this man who had upended her life. "I'm afraid too," she confessed, surprised by her own boldness. Thomas took a step closer, reducing the space between them. With infinite delicacy, he brushed her cheek with his fingertips, giving her all the time to turn away if she wished. She didn't step back. When their lips finally met, it was as if the entire world faded away around them. Sweet, respectful, full of promises, this kiss contained everything they hadn't yet dared to tell each other. Time seemed to stop in this jasmine garden as the sun disappeared behind the New York horizon, bathing their embrace in an almost supernatural golden light. When they finally separated, Sophia felt tears running down her cheeks. Thomas gently wiped them away with his thumb. "Why are you crying?" he asked softly. "Because I never knew it could be like this," she replied with disarming honesty. That night, walking side by side in the moonlit gardens, they spoke of everything that had been tacit between them, of books left like breadcrumbs to guide her to him, of glances exchanged over coffee cups, of that shared solitude which, paradoxically, had brought them closer. "I've spent my life feeling invisible," confided Sophia. "And then one day I realized that someone truly saw me. Not the housekeeper, not the Brooklyn girl, but me." Thomas interlaced his fingers with hers, this simple gesture sealing a silent promise between them. "And I've spent my life being seen for what I possessed rather than who I was," he replied, "until I met someone who saw beyond appearances." Under the New York stars, two solitudes had just found their common constellation. But neither of them yet suspected the storms preparing on the horizon of their nascent happiness. October arrived with its russet leaves and misty mornings. Sophia and Thomas lived these first days of their relationship with the cautious wonder of those who have known too many disappointments to easily believe in happiness. To respect appearances and preserve their intimacy, Sophia officially continued her work as housekeeper. But in private, their relationship deepened. Candlelit dinners in the veranda, long conversations before the fireplace, mutual discovery of those small details that make up a person's essence. That October morning, the mansion seemed particularly peaceful. Thomas had left for a business meeting in California, promising to return that very evening with a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet to celebrate their first month together. Sophia hummed while arranging chrysanthemums in the entryway when the doorbell rang. Opening the heavy door, her blood instantly froze. Mark stood before her, her ex-boyfriend from whom she'd had no news for 3 years. Tall, aggressively handsome, with those dark eyes that had once fascinated her before terrifying her. The smell of alcohol emanating from him at 10 in the morning boded nothing good. "Surprise," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Aren't you going to invite me in, Sophia?" She gripped the door like a shield. "How did you find me?" "Your mother. I played the concerned good guy. She told me everything. Your job as a maid in this mansion, your billionaire boss." His gaze swept over the sumptuous entrance hall behind her. "Nice place. You've come up in the world since our little studio in Brooklyn." Each of his words revived memories that Sophia had spent 3 years burying. The constant humiliations, the shoves that left bruises, the cruel words that destroy from the inside more surely than any physical violence. "You need to leave," she said, struggling to keep her voice from trembling. "Now." He took a step forward, forcing his way into the entrance. "Not so fast. You and I have things to talk about." She backed away, instinctively seeking an exit. "There's nothing to say. We've been over for a long time." His joyless laugh echoed under the high ceilings. "We're never really over, Sophia. You know that well." He approached further, invading her personal space in that way that had always given her the impression of suffocating. "You think I haven't figured out your little game? The little housekeeper who seduces the billionaire? It's so cliché." Anger rose in her, not just against him, but against that part of herself that, for an instant, had let his words reach her, sowing doubt in what she was experiencing with Thomas. "You know nothing about my life," she articulated slowly, "and you no longer have a place in it." His eyes darkened dangerously. That look she knew too well, the one that always preceded the worst moments. "You belong to me," he hissed, brutally seizing her wrist. "You've always been mine." The pain was sharp, but the fear even more so, that visceral terror of finding herself trapped again in that toxic relationship that had nearly destroyed her. "Let her go. Immediately." Thomas's voice, icy and sharp as steel, resonated in the entrance hall. He stood in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the daylight. Mark turned without releasing Sophia. "And here's the knight in shining armor," he mocked. "This is a private matter between her and me, Mr. Billionaire. Thomas advanced calmly, his gaze passing from Sophia to the wrist she now massaged after Mark had released her. "There's nothing private that justifies hurting someone," he responded in a dangerously calm voice. "You will never come near her again. I have excellent lawyers and sufficient witnesses of this scene. Leave while you still can." A moment of electric tension passed between the two men, one representing everything Sophia had fled from, the other embodying what she was just beginning to hope for. Mark hesitated, visibly assessing the situation, measuring the determination in Thomas's eyes. Finally, he backed toward the door. "This isn't over," he threw out, as a last attempt at asserting power. "Yes, it is," Thomas firmly replied. "And if you return or if you attempt to contact her in any way, the consequences will be considerable." When the door finally closed on Mark's figure, Sophia collapsed, her legs trembling. Thomas immediately joined her, enveloping her in his arms without directly touching her, leaving her the space she needed. That night, curled up in a library armchair, a cup of tea in her hands, she told him everything. The 3 years with Mark, the progressive descent into the hell of an abusive relationship, how she had gradually lost herself until she no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. "I was so ashamed," she confessed, "of not having the strength to leave earlier, of accepting things I had sworn I would never tolerate." Thomas listened without interrupting her, his face expressing alternately pain, anger, and infinite tenderness. "The shame is not yours to bear," he finally said. "It belongs to those who abuse their power over others." He knelt before her, gently taking her hands in his. "I can't erase your past, Sophia, but I can promise you that as long as I'm in your life, you will never again feel powerless or invisible." This promise, pronounced in the peaceful sanctuary of the library with its thousands of volumes, seemed to seal something between them. A commitment deeper than simple words of love, an alliance against the shadows that had haunted them both for too long. The first rumors arrived with November and its icy fogs. First simple whispers among the staff, sidelong glances, conversations that stopped when Sophia entered a room. Then mysterious phone calls, veiled comments about the young woman's motivations. The source became clear during a family dinner where Thomas had invited distant cousins from Napa Valley, owners of vineyards adjacent to his. Sophia, officially present to supervise the service, immediately felt the tension in the air. "So she's the housekeeper everyone's talking about," commented Helen, a woman in her 50s with a pinched face accentuating the word housekeeper in a way that gave it an entirely different connotation. "Sophia is much more than that," Thomas calmly replied, giving her a warm smile that didn't go unnoticed. Later in the evening, while checking the desserts in the kitchen, Sophia overheard a conversation clearly not intended for her. "It's so predictable," said Helen's voice. "A lonely man, vulnerable after his divorce, an opportunistic young woman." She calculated her move well. "Do you think he doesn't see her game?" replied her husband. "The Blackwood inheritance represents millions. She's certainly not the first to try. The problem is that he seems really smitten. Frank told me he was even talking about involving her in the family foundation. Can you imagine? A Brooklyn girl managing Blackwood money." These words struck Sophia like daggers. The old shame, the one she thought she had begun to overcome, returned forcefully. That visceral certainty of not being in her place, of never truly being able to belong to Thomas's world. In the days that followed, the rumors amplified. Articles in the tabloid press began to allude to the idyll between a wine millionaire and his housekeeper. Paparazzi even appeared around the mansion, hoping to capture a compromising image. Sophia felt doubt insinuating itself into her like a slow poison. What if these people were right? What if, unconsciously, she had manipulated Thomas? What if she were just a passing fancy, a moment of weakness in the life of a man who deserved so much better than her? On a particularly cold November night, she made a decision. With methodical, almost detached gestures, she began to fill her old suitcase, the one with which she had arrived 7 years earlier, full of hopes and modest dreams. Leave before being rejected. Disappear before Thomas realized his mistake. Preserve what remained of her dignity. She was folding her housekeeper's uniform when the door to her room gently opened. Thomas stood there, observing her with an indecipherable expression. "You're leaving," he simply stated. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, unable to speak, tears threatening to overflow. Why? This simple question, asked without accusation, just with a palpable sadness, broke something in her. You've heard what they're saying, she finally murmured. What everyone thinks. And that's important. How could it not be? She exclaimed, her voice breaking. They're right, Thomas. Look at us. Look at me. I don't belong in your world. I'll never know how to behave like them, speak like them, be like them. He slowly approached, sitting on the edge of the bed next to the open suitcase. Do you believe what they're saying? He asked, his voice trembling with contained emotion. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they hadn't yet dared to confess. I believe you deserve better, she finally whispered. Someone who won't cause you scandal, who can support you in your world, who... I believe in what I see every day, he gently but firmly interrupted. A woman who cares for everything and everyone with love, who chooses carnations thinking of brightening others' day, who reads poetry in secret because she believes she doesn't deserve time for herself. It's this woman I see. And it's her with whom I fall more and more in love each day. He delicately took her hand, compelling her to look him in the eyes. These people who talk, Sophia, they don't know us. They don't know how you held my hand when I cried during the June storm. They haven't seen your strength when you confronted your past. They have no idea who we are together. A tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. What if I hurt you? If I disappoint you? What if we stopped letting fear decide our lives? He replied with a tender smile. My greatest fear isn't what people might say or think. It's losing you before having had the chance to discover all that we could build together. That night they talked until dawn about their fears, their hopes, the obstacles that still awaited them. And slowly the suitcase was emptied, the clothes put away, like a renewed promise not to flee from what frightened them. December brought the first snows and an unexpected decision from Thomas. While Sophia was still getting used to their new intimacy, he proposed that she officially accompany him to a series of social events, a charity gala at the Metropolitan Opera, business dinners at the Plaza Hotel, a benefit auction in Central Park. You want to present me publicly? She asked, astonished. I want to walk by your side, without hiding, he replied simply. Unless you prefer to wait. This idea both terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. Entering Thomas's world, facing the stares, the judgments, the inevitable comparisons with his ex-wife, who had always moved in these privileged circles. Their first public appearance was at the Metropolitan Opera for a gala benefiting heritage restoration. Sophia wore a midnight blue dress sprinkled with tiny crystals reminiscent of a starry sky, custom-made by a stylist friend of Thomas. Simple but elegant. Like Sophia herself, the designer had commented. Climbing the steps of the opera house, she felt her hand tremble in Thomas's. Everyone will wonder who I am, she murmured. And I'll be very proud to tell them that you're the woman who transformed my life, he replied, gently squeezing her fingers. The first curious glances, whispers behind fans, polite but questioning smiles, Sophia absorbed them like an actress thrown on stage without rehearsal. Thomas remained constantly by her side, a reassuring presence, introducing her with undisguised pride as the most important woman in my life. As the evenings passed, she learned to navigate this new world. Some welcomed her with sincere warmth, mainly those who truly knew Thomas and rejoiced in his rediscovered happiness. Others maintained a polite distance, visibly waiting to see if this relationship was serious or simply passing. But it was during a benefit auction for women victims of violence that Sophia truly found her voice. As the bidding proceeded for luxury items, an idea germinated in her mind. During the break, she timidly approached the organizer, an elegant woman in her 60s. Excuse me, Mrs. Fontaine, I have a suggestion, if you permit. The following hour was dedicated to an animated discussion in which Sophia shared her personal experience, evoked the lack of shelter structures for women leaving abusive relationships, particularly those without financial resources. What's needed isn't just emergency accommodations, but long-term accompaniment programs, psychological help, professional training, legal support, she explained, with a passion that surprised those listening to her. Thomas, observing the scene from afar, felt his heart swell with pride seeing Sophia animate, her eyes bright with deep conviction. That evening marked a turning point. The project of a comprehensive shelter in Brooklyn Heights took shape, financially supported by Thomas but entirely conceptualized by Sophia. "It's your project," he insisted. "I'll provide the resources, but it will be your vision that guides it." In January, on a cold but sunny morning, Sophia stood before a renovated building in Brooklyn Heights, scissors in hand to cut the inaugural ribbon of the New Beginning Center. Her mother was there, recovered and proud, as well as several women she had met during the project's development, each carrying her own story of survival. "I wasn't sure I had my place in this world," she said in a brief speech that surprised her with its sincerity. "But I understood that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest strength. If my experience can help even one woman believe in a better future, then every difficult moment will have been worth it." Thomas, standing in the front row, didn't try to hide the tears glistening in his eyes. At that precise moment, he knew with absolute certainty that this courageous woman hadn't only transformed his life, she was transforming those of many other people. Sophia's path in this new world wasn't without pitfalls. There were still condescending looks, barely veiled comments about her modest origins, but each day she found her place a little more, not by becoming someone else, but by remaining authentically herself. February brought an unexpected warming of the weather and a visit that would mark a turning point in Sophia's life. Her mother, now completely recovered, came to spend a few days at the mansion, a proposal from Thomas that had initially seemed incongruous to the elderly lady, accustomed to her small Brooklyn apartment. "It's too big for me," she had protested. "I'll get lost in these corridors." But Thomas's affectionate insistence and Sophia's evident joy had finally convinced her. That morning, the three shared breakfast on the sunny terrace. Still warm croissants, steaming hot chocolate, artistically arranged fresh fruits, a simple luxury that seemed almost unreal to Mrs. Miller. "So, Thomas," she began, delicately spreading apricot jam on her croissant, "what are your intentions toward my daughter?" Sophia nearly choked on her hot chocolate. "Mom," she protested, mortified. Thomas smiled, not at all disconcerted by this direct question. "Very serious intentions, Mrs. Miller," he replied with disarming sincerity. "I love your daughter more than I thought possible to love someone, and if she'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life by her side." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. The elderly lady long observed the man seated across from her, this heir to a colossal fortune, who spoke of her daughter with such evident tenderness. "My Sophia hasn't had an easy life," she finally said. "Her father abandoned us when she was 3. I had to work hard, very hard, to make a living for us, and perhaps—" her voice wavered slightly. "Perhaps in my determination to make her strong, I also convinced her that she didn't deserve kindness, that women like us should be content to survive without ever dreaming too big." She set down her cup and looked her daughter straight in the eyes. "You deserve to be happy, my daughter. I was wrong about everything, about what you could accomplish, about what you deserved." Tears flowed freely down Sophia's cheeks, liberating tears that washed away decades of doubt and self-deprecation. "I always wanted you to be proud of me," she murmured. "I always was," her mother replied, taking her hand. "But I was afraid for you, afraid the world would hurt you like it hurt me. So I tried to protect you by teaching you not to hope too much. It was a mistake." Thomas observed this exchange, aware of witnessing a moment of deep healing between this mother and her daughter. Discreetly, he rose to give them the necessary privacy, but Mrs. Miller stopped him with a gesture. "Stay, Thomas. You're part of this story now." Later that day, as the three strolled through the gardens, Sophia realized that something had finally been freed within her, that knot of guilt and unworthiness she had carried since childhood. Her mother's blessing, those words she had waited for all her life, had unlocked a door she had kept closed for too long. That evening, in the library where everything had truly begun between them, Thomas knelt before Sophia, holding not a ring, but an antique key. "This isn't a marriage proposal," he said, seeing her surprised expression. "Not yet. I believe we both still have healing to complete before that step." He opened his hand, revealing a key of wrought iron, patinated by the years. "It's the key to the little house on Lake Tahoe, the one my grandfather built with his own hands. The only possession I've always refused to share with anyone. It's where I went when I needed to find myself, to reconnect with the essential." Sophia delicately took the key, understanding the depth of the symbol. "I'd like to take you there this spring," he continued, Just the two of us, away from gazes and expectations. A place where we can simply be, without past or titles. Just Thomas and Sophia. She closed her fingers around the key, feeling its reassuring weight in her palm. "I'd like that very much," she replied simply. That night, lying against Thomas in the bedroom they now shared, Sophia felt lighter than she had ever been. The path traveled from the housekeeper with lowered eyes to the woman she was becoming day by day sometimes seemed dizzying to her. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas murmured in the darkness. "About the way people find their path to each other," she replied softly. "All these coincidences, these small decisions that seem insignificant in the moment, but that change everything. If I hadn't answered that ad for a housekeeper position 7 years ago," he drew her closer, kissing her forehead, "I believe some souls are destined to find each other, no matter the detours." Spring arrived with an explosion of new life, buds bursting on century-old trees, first irises pointing in the flower beds, intoxicating fragrances of gardens awakening after winter. New York rediscovered that particular light that had inspired so many painters through the centuries. The little house on Lake Tahoe, with its stone walls and slate roof, had become their refuge, far from the mansion and its conventions, far from curious gazes and social expectations. Here, Sophia and Thomas rediscovered a simplicity they had missed, cooking together, walking at twilight along the peaceful shores, reading side by side before the fireplace when evenings turned cool. These regular escapes allowed them to weave an even deeper relationship, anchored not in their social roles, but in this authentic connection that had attracted them to each other from the beginning. Back in New York, Sophia fully invested herself in the New Beginning Center. What had started as a simple shelter had become a true reintegration program, where women found not only security, but also confidence and autonomy. "You've transformed their lives," Thomas told her one day after a visit to the center, where they had witnessed the awarding of professional diplomas to 5 residents. "They transformed their own," Sophia gently corrected. "I just showed them it was possible, as you did for me." The most visible change was occurring in the way Sophia now occupied her place in the world, no longer apologizing for existing, but fully assuming who she was. During a gala dinner benefiting the Blackwood Foundation, she found herself face to face with Helen, the cousin who had been so contemptuous during their first meeting. "Sophia," the woman greeted her with a constrained smile, "you seem different." "I'm still the same, Helen," she replied with quiet confidence. "It's just that now I no longer try to make myself smaller so others feel bigger." In May, as the flowering chestnuts created white and pink avenues along Fifth Avenue, Thomas and Sophia walked hand in hand, enjoying the evening's mildness. They had just attended a conference where Sophia had spoken for the first time, sharing her experience and presenting the encouraging results of the center. "I'm so proud of you," he said, stopping to admire her in the golden light of sunset. "You've traveled an incredible path." "We've traveled it together," she corrected. "I would never have dared dream so big without you." He gently shook his head. "You're mistaken, Sophia. This strength was in you from the beginning. I just helped you see it." They stopped near a fountain, the water play sparkling in the declining light. Thomas pulled out a small, midnight blue velvet case from his pocket. "I know we said we would take our time," he began, "but some certainties don't need to wait." He opened the case, revealing not a traditional ring, but a delicate white gold bracelet adorned with a single jasmine in diamonds and white sapphires. "This isn't a marriage proposal, not yet," he clarified with a smile. "It's a promise to continue this path together, wherever it leads us." He delicately attached the jewel around Sophia's wrist. "I love you, Sophia Miller, not despite your past or your origins, but with all that makes you the extraordinary woman you are." Tears of joy glistened in Sophia's eyes. "And I love you, Thomas Blackwood, for having taught me that true love isn't in grand gestures or grandiose declarations, but in this way of saying, let's take our time when the whole world rushes us." Under the New York stars that began to appear in the twilight sky, they sealed this promise with a kiss that contained everything. The past they had transcended, the present they cherished, and the future they would continue to build day by day, without haste. 1 year later, the June sun bathed the mansion's garden in golden light, transforming the beds of jasmines into fragrant clouds. Tables had been set up under the century-old trees, white tablecloths gently floating in the light breeze. Sophia stood before the window of what had once been her small attic room. She wore a simple ivory dress, her hair adorned with a sprig of fresh jasmine. At her side, her mother arranged the light veil with gestures full of tenderness. "You're beautiful, my daughter," she murmured, eyes bright with emotion. Below in the garden, guests were beginning to settle, an eclectic mix that alone told the story of these past 2 years. Women from the New Beginning Center, alongside California vintners and New York financiers, Thomas's family chatting with former Brooklyn neighbors. Worlds that should never have met, united by the improbable love story that had touched them all in one way or another. A gentle knock came at the door. Claire, Thomas's sister, entered with a conspiratorial smile. "It's time," she announced, "and my brother is in a state of nervousness I've never seen him in before." Sophia took a deep breath, feeling the jasmine fragrance envelop her like a promise. "I'm ready." The path to the garden seemed to her both interminable and too short, these final steps that still separated her from her new life. Outside, the light dazzled her for an instant, before she distinguished Thomas's silhouette waiting for her under a flowered arch. When their gazes met, everything else seemed to fade away. There were no longer mansion or guests, just the two of them, like that stormy day when they had truly seen each other for the first time. "Here we are," he murmured, taking her hands in his, once she had joined him. The ceremony was simple and deeply personal. They had written their own vows, promises that spoke not of an idealized love, but of a conscious commitment to continue growing together. "I promise to never forget what we've learned," Thomas declared, his voice ringing clear in the silent garden. "That love isn't in grand declarations, but in this way of saying, let's take our time when everything pushes us to run." Sophia smiled, recognizing her own words from a year earlier. "And I promise to never stop believing in the possibility of new beginnings," she replied, "to remind us that we are more than our past, more than our titles or our origins, that what truly matters is the ability to see beyond appearances, to touch the other's soul." When they exchanged the rings, simple gold bands adorned with a tiny engraved jasmine flower, a ray of sun filtered through the leaves, illuminating their joined hands like a sign. The reception that followed resembled more a joyful family reunion than a worldly event. Thomas and Sophia passed from one table to another, taking the time to truly speak with each guest, creating improbable connections between these very different worlds. Toward the end of the evening, as lanterns lit up in the trees and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia slipped away for a moment, seeking a bit of solitude to fully absorb the intensity of this day. She found herself in the library, this sanctuary where everything had truly begun between them. The room was exactly the same, with its thousands of leather-bound volumes, its characteristic scent of old paper and polished wood. Yet everything had changed. Thomas joined her a few minutes later, as if he had guessed where to find her. "Do you remember the first time we really talked here?" he asked, approaching. Sophia smiled, brushing the binding of a book of poetry with her fingertips. "You gave me that collection of Dickinson. It was the first time someone truly saw me, not the housekeeper, not the Brooklyn girl, just me." He gently drew her to him, breathing the jasmine scent in her hair. "And today, everyone sees you, the extraordinary woman you've always been." She raised her eyes to him, her gaze infused with infinite tenderness. "The most beautiful gift you gave me, Thomas, was teaching me patience. In a world that constantly pushes us forward, you showed me the beauty of taking our time." In the soft half-light of the library, surrounded by the silent witnesses of their story, they sealed this new promise with a kiss that contained everything. The past they had transcended, the present they cherished, and the future they would continue to build, day by day, without haste. And in the garden where the celebration continued, the jasmines perfumed the night air with their intoxicating aroma, an olfactory reminder that certain flowers reveal their true essence only when the light dims, and that darkness, far from being an end, can be the beginning of an even deeper flowering. For sometimes the most beautiful love stories are not those that begin with love at first sight, but those built slowly, with patience, like a garden cultivated season after season, until it becomes a refuge where two souls can fully blossom together.